The first thing Isabela noticed was not the music stopping. It was Enrique's hand. He was holding hers too tightly. Not romantic tight. Not nervous tight. It was the kind of tight that made her fingers ache. She almost turned to look at him, but the guests were smiling. Phones raised, the officiant clearing his throat, the rings resting on a small white cushion between them. It was supposed to be the easiest moment of her life. She had rehearsed this smile in the mirror. She had practiced not crying too much. She had imagined this exact second since the day he proposed, when he promised her that nothing in his life made sense until she arrived. Enrique slid the ring onto her finger. Applause started too early, a few laughs. Someone whispered, finally. Isabela exhaled. Then she heard it, a sharp, steady sound against the stone path. Heels. Not hurried, not hesitant, just certain. One step, then another. The music faltered, not fully stopping but thinning out, like someone lowering the volume without meaning to. Enrique's hand loosened, not slowly. Suddenly, she felt the absence before she saw the reason. Conversations dipped, then stretched into silence, the kind that spreads across a crowd in waves. Isabela turned her head. A woman was walking toward them down the aisle. She wasn't dressed for a scene. No dramatic entrance. No tears. Pale pink dress. Hair pulled back. Eyes forward. Calm. Too calm. For a second, Isabela assumed it was a mistake. A confused guest. Someone who thought the ceremony had ended. But the woman didn't look confused. She looked resolved. Enrique stopped breathing the way people do when they are caught. It was subtle. His shoulders lifted slightly and didn't fall. Isabela felt it beside her. Enrique, she whispered, barely moving her lips. He didn't answer. The woman stopped a few feet from the altar, close enough that Isabela could see her hands were steady, close enough that everyone could see this was not part of the ceremony. A murmur rose from the guests. Someone coughed. The officiant stepped back instinctively, as if sensing something sacred had just shifted into something fragile. The woman looked first at Enrique, not angrily, not pleading, just directly. Then she turned to Isabela. Their eyes met, and in that look, there was no rivalry. There was recognition. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding," the woman said. Her voice did not shake. It carried without effort. "I'm here because you deserve the truth." The word truth did not echo. It landed. Enrique found his voice too quickly. "This is insane," he said. A short laugh forced out of his chest. "Isabela, she's confused. This is not, say my name." The woman interrupted softly, still looking at him. Enrique didn't. That silence was louder than anything else. "My name is Camila," she said, now to Isabela. "And I didn't know about you." There it was. Not shouted, not dramatized, just placed between them. Isabela felt something inside her rearrange. Not break, rearrange. 6 months ago, Enrique had started traveling more for work. He said it was temporary. He said he was building something for their future. There were late calls he took in another room. A weekend he canceled because of a client emergency. She had felt uneasy then, but she had told herself not to be dramatic, not to be that woman. She had trusted him because trust was easier than doubt. "Enrique," she said again, this time not whispering. "What is she talking about?" He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice like this was still private. "She's exaggerating. We dated. It ended. She can't accept it." Camila tilted her head slightly. "We didn't end," she said. "Not until last night." A visible reaction moved through the guests. A collective intake of breath. Someone near the back muttered something that sounded like a prayer. Isabela's father took one step forward, then stopped when she raised her hand slightly without looking at him. "Last night," Isabela repeated. She was surprised at how steady she sounded. Camila nodded. "He told me he needed time, that he had financial issues to fix before making things official, that he couldn't introduce me to certain people yet because of work." She paused, then added, "He said after the wedding things would be clearer." The word wedding hung there, strange and misplaced. Enrique's jaw tightened. "You're twisting everything." "Am I?" Camila reached into her bag slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a thin envelope. She didn't wave it. She didn't thrust it forward. She just held it. I brought messages, she said, not to humiliate you, but so you won't question your own memory later. Isabela stared at the envelope but didn't take it. Her eyes stayed on Enrique. Look at me, she said. It wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. Enrique looked. For half a second. Then his gaze slid away. That was the moment the ceremony ended, even if no one announced it. Isabela felt the weight of the ring on her finger as if it had suddenly doubled. Did you love her? She asked him. The question surprised even her. Camila answered before he could. He told me he loved me, she said quietly. Every day. Enrique snapped. Stop. It wasn't a shout. It was panic. Isabela turned to Camila. And you? She asked. Did you love him? Camila's composure flickered for the first time. Not with anger. With sadness. I love who I thought he was. The honesty in that answer cut cleaner than any accusation. Isabela nodded once. She understood that sentence more than she wanted to. Around them, the guests shifted, uncertain whether to leave or stay. No one moved. No one wanted to miss what would happen next. Enrique reached for Isabela's hand again. She let him hold it for a second, then gently pulled it back. You said you were building a future for us, she said, her eyes still on his. Was that while you were building one with her too? He opened his mouth. Closed it. It's not like that, he tried. Then what is it like? She asked. He had no clean answer. And for the first time since Camila walked in, Isabela felt something unexpected beneath the humiliation. Clarity. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. She looked at Camila again. You didn't know about me? Camila shook her head. If I had known, I wouldn't be here. Not like this. There was no competition in her tone. No claim. Just fact. Enrique looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but morally. The altar behind him no longer framed him as a groom. It framed him as a man exposed. Isabela took a slow breath. The music had completely stopped now. Even the wind seemed to have withdrawn. How long? She asked. 6 months, Camila answered. 6 months. The exact amount of time since Enrique had started coming home late with explanations that sounded rehearsed. The exact amount of time since he had begun locking his phone screen more carefully. Isabela felt foolish for every moment she had silenced her instincts. But she also felt something else rising. Not rage. Decision. Enrique stepped closer, lowering his voice urgently. We can talk about this after. Don't do this here. Don't do this here. As if she were the one causing the scene. Isabela looked around at the guests. Friends. Family. People who had flown in. People who believed in this union. She felt the weight of their eyes, but it didn't crush her. It steadied her. She turned back to Enrique. When were you going to tell me? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was answer enough. Camila lowered the envelope slightly. I didn't come to fight, she said. I came because no one deserves to start a marriage based on a lie. The word marriage sounded almost ironic now. Isabela felt the ring again. Cold, present, binding. And for the first time that day, she wondered if love without truth was just performance. She straightened her posture, not for the guests, not for appearances, but because she suddenly needed to feel her own spine. Enrique, she said quietly, is there anything you want to say before I decide what happens next? And this time, every single person there understood that the wedding was no longer the event. The decision was. Enrique swallowed before answering. And that small delay did more damage than any confession could have. This is a misunderstanding, he said, but his voice no longer carried the confidence it had 10 minutes ago when he promised forever in front of everyone they knew. Isabela watched him carefully now, not as a bride, but as someone evaluating a stranger. She noticed the way his fingers kept flexing at his sides, the way he avoided looking at Camila directly, the way he kept glancing at the guests, as if searching for support. Then explain it, she said. Not loud, not angry, just direct. Enrique is shaled sharply. We met months ago. It was casual. It wasn't serious. Camila let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Casual, she repeated. You met my parents. A ripple moved through the crowd again. Enrique's face tightened. That doesn't mean you told my father you wanted to build something stable, Camila continued evenly. You asked him about investments. You talked about future plans. She wasn't speaking fast. She wasn't emotional. She was listing facts. And facts were harder to fight than accusations. Isabela felt something inside her settle into place. Enrique wasn't panicking because Camila was dramatic. He was panicking because she was calm. How many times? Isabela asked him. He blinked. What? How many times did you tell her you loved her? Silence. The kind that stretches and exposes everything it touches. Enrique ran a hand through his hair. You're twisting this into something it's not. I'm asking a simple question. It's complicated. No, Isabela said quietly. It's not. Camila looked at Isabela then, not with pity, but with understanding. He told me he loved me every morning, she said, and every night. He said he had never felt this sure about someone before. Enrique turned sharply toward her. Stop talking. There was again that note of fear. Isabela's eyes didn't leave his face. Did you ever tell her about me? She asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation was longer this time. It wasn't relevant, he finally said. The answer landed heavier than a yes. Camila shook her head slightly. He said he had dated someone a long time ago, she said. That it ended because you wanted different things. She paused, then added, he said he was finally ready for something real. A quiet, almost imperceptible sound escaped from someone in the second row. Shock has a way of making people forget their manners. Isabela felt heat rise to her face, but she didn't let it turn into tears. Not here. Not now. When did you find out? She asked Camila. About me. Yesterday, Camila replied. I saw a photo. Someone tagged him in an engagement party picture. Enrique closed his eyes briefly, as if that detail physically hurt. You were going to marry me without telling her? Isabela asked him. He opened his eyes again, and for a second there was something like pleading in them. I was going to end it, he said. I just needed time. You had 6 months, Camila answered. And you chose yesterday. The simplicity of that sentence stripped away every excuse. Isabela felt her pulse in her throat. Not from rage, from realization. Every late meeting, every canceled dinner, every moment she had told herself she was being insecure. She remembered asking him once, half joking, there isn't someone else, right? And how quickly he had kissed her to silence the question. She had taken that as reassurance. Now it felt like strategy. Enrique stepped closer again, lowering his voice. We can fix this, he said urgently. Don't throw everything away because of a mistake. A mistake. The word was too small for what had just unfolded. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Isabela said. This was a decision. Repeatedly. Camila's grip tightened slightly on the envelope. She hadn't moved from her spot. She wasn't trying to claim him. She wasn't trying to win. She looked like someone who had already lost something and simply refused to lose her dignity too. I didn't come to fight over him, she said softly. I came because I know what it feels like to be the last person to know. That sentence cut deeper than anything else. Isabela nodded almost imperceptibly. She understood that fear. The fear of being made a fool in a room full of witnesses. The fear of realizing your intuition was right, but you ignored it because love felt safer than confrontation. Enrique looked around again, as if hoping someone would intervene. No one did. Even the officiant stood still, hands folded, waiting. You're both overreacting. Enrique tried again. I was confused. I didn't want to hurt anyone. You didn't want to lose anyone, Camila corrected. The difference mattered. Isabela studied his face one more time, searching for the man she thought she knew. The one who had held her when she lost her job. The one who had promised her honesty above everything else. She could still see traces of him. But now she also saw the gaps. The contradictions. The rehearsed charm. If she hadn't come today, Isabela said slowly, when would you have told me? Enrique's silence answered first. Then he said, I would have handled it. How? Privately. After the honeymoon? She asked. He didn't respond. Camila's eyes softened slightly at that. Not toward him. Toward Isabela. I asked him last night if there was someone else, Camila said. He said no. He looked at me the same way he's looking at you now. Enrique snapped. That's enough. No, Isabela said. This time her voice carried. Not a shout, but firm enough that it settled over the guests like a command. Enrique stopped speaking. That small shift in power did not go unnoticed. Isabela turned fully toward Camila. "Why today?" she asked. "Why not call? Why not message?" Camila inhaled slowly. "Because if I called, he would have convinced you I was crazy. If I texted, he would have deleted it. But here," she glanced around at the witnesses, at the altar, at the unfinished ceremony. "Here he has to answer." Enrique laughed under his breath, but it sounded hollow. "You think this makes you noble?" he said to Camila. "No," she replied calmly. "It makes me honest." That word again. Honest. It seemed to hover over the ceremony like a judgment. Isabela felt the weight of every eye in the garden, but she no longer felt small under them. Something was shifting inside her. The humiliation she expected to feel wasn't dominating her. What she felt instead was clarity sharpening into resolve. "Did you love her?" she asked Enrique one last time. He hesitated, then said, "It wasn't love like this. It wasn't love like this." As if betrayal could be ranked. As if deceit came in degrees that made it acceptable. Camila closed her eyes briefly at that, absorbing the final confirmation. Isabela let out a slow breath. "And yet," she said quietly, "it was enough to risk this." She gestured slightly around them, the guests, the altar, the vows half-spoken. Enrique had no reply that could survive the truth, standing 3 feet away from him. The wind picked up slightly, lifting the edge of Isabela's veil. She didn't fix it. She didn't care. "You told me," she continued, her voice steady, "that loyalty was the one thing you valued above everything." Enrique looked at her, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of who he was supposed to be in this moment. The groom? The victim? The man caught? "I do value loyalty," he insisted weakly. Camila spoke before Isabela could. "Then you should have practiced it." The simplicity of that sentence landed like a verdict. Isabela felt something settle completely inside her now. Not anger, not heartbreak. A decision forming quietly, inevitably. Enrique reached toward her again, but she stepped back this time. Not dramatically, just enough to create space. And in that small distance, the shape of the future changed. Enrique felt the distance the moment she stepped back, and for the first time since Camila walked down the aisle, he stopped trying to control the narrative and started trying to control the damage. "Isabela, don't make a decision like this in front of everyone," he said, lowering his voice again, as if intimacy could still be manufactured on command. "We owe it to ourselves to talk privately." The word privately sounded almost offensive now. Isabela looked at him carefully. "Privately?" she repeated. "Like you handled everything else?" He flinched at that. Camila remained still, but she no longer looked like an intruder. She looked like someone waiting for truth to finish doing what it had already started. Enrique tried another angle. "You're letting her manipulate this," he said, gesturing vaguely toward Camila without fully facing her. "She's angry. She wants revenge." Camila didn't react to the accusation. She simply lifted the envelope slightly again. "If I wanted revenge, I would read these out loud," she said. "Every message, every promise, every plan." A visible tension ran through Enrique's shoulders. "Don't," he said sharply. It wasn't authority. It was fear. Isabela noticed that. She noticed everything now. The way his voice rose only when he was cornered. The way he avoided direct answers. The way he framed everything as someone else's overreaction. "You asked me to trust you," Isabela said slowly. Over and over again. Enrique nodded quickly, seizing on something he thought he could use. "And you should. I love you." The words came fast, almost rehearsed. Isabela held his gaze. "You said that to her too." He opened his mouth, but this time nothing came out. Camila spoke quietly. "He told me he was ready to settle down," she said. "He said he was tired of games." Enrique turned toward her again. "I was." "You were playing 2 lives?" she replied. "That's not settling down." The guests were no longer pretending not to listen. Phones were still raised, but no one was smiling anymore. The air felt heavy, not with drama, but with recognition. Everyone had seen some version of this story before. Maybe not this public. Maybe not this clean. but familiar enough to feel uncomfortable. Isabela felt the ring pressing into her skin again. She lifted her hand slightly and stared at it. It looked exactly the same as it had 15 minutes ago. Gold, polished, innocent, and yet it no longer represented what she thought it did. Enrique followed her gaze. "Don't do something you'll regret," he said softly. "We've built too much." "Built." The word lingered. "You built two things," she corrected, "and you expected neither to collapse." He stepped closer again, instinctively, but she didn't move this time. She didn't retreat either. She simply stood there, grounded. "I made a mistake," he said. "A stupid one. But it doesn't erase what we have." Camila's voice cut in gently. It wasn't one mistake. She looked at Isabela. It was a routine that hit differently. Not a moment. Not a lapse. A routine. Isabela felt that word settle in her chest. A routine of lies. A routine of affection divided. A routine of choosing himself over honesty. "How did you find out about me?" she asked Camila again, needing clarity. "The engagement photo," Camila answered. "I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe it was old. I asked him directly. He said it was nothing, a family obligation. Then I called a mutual friend. She told me everything." Enrique looked at the ground now. The image of him unraveling was almost quieter than the confrontation itself. "You were going to let her stand here," Camila said softly, "and say vows while you were still telling me you loved me." Isabela's throat tightened, but her voice didn't. "Is that true?" Enrique hesitated again, and that hesitation felt final. "I didn't know how to fix it," he muttered. "You don't fix betrayal," Isabela replied. "You prevent it." The simplicity of that truth left no room for defense. Camila lowered the envelope slightly, as if sensing that the documents were no longer necessary. The evidence was standing in front of them in flesh and silence. Enrique made one last attempt. "You're throwing away a future because of pride," he said. That word changed something. Pride. As if dignity were ego. As if self-respect were stubbornness. Isabela looked at him with a calm she didn't know she possessed. "No," she said. "I'm refusing to build a future on a lie." The difference was clear. The guests shifted again. Some looked down. Some looked at Enrique with something close to disappointment. No one looked at Isabela with pity anymore. That dynamic had shifted without announcement. Enrique sensed it too. "We can fix this," he insisted again, softer now. "Therapy. Time. I'll cut contact. I'll prove it." Camila didn't respond to that. She didn't need to. Isabela studied his face one last time, searching not for excuses, but for accountability. "Say it," she said quietly. "Say what you did." He frowned. "You know what I did. Say it." There was no anger in her tone, just expectation. Enrique swallowed. His voice dropped. "I lied," he said. The word sounded foreign in his mouth. "For how long?" she pressed. He hesitated. 6 months. To how many people? 2. The math was simple. The weight was not. Isabela nodded once, as if confirming something internally. "Thank you," she said. The politeness confused him. For what? For finally being honest. That line didn't humiliate him. It exposed him. Camila looked at Isabela then, really looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. Not friendship, not alliance, recognition. 2 women who had been living in the same lie from different rooms. Enrique tried again to reach for Isabela's hand, but this time she stepped away decisively. "Don't," she said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The word carried authority now. He froze. For the first time, he obeyed. Isabela felt her heart beating steadily, not wildly. The chaos she expected never arrived. Instead, there was an almost unsettling calm. She turned slowly toward the officiant, who was still holding the ceremony script, uncertain. Then she looked at the guests, at her parents, at his family, at friends who had flown across the country to witness a promise that now felt counterfeit. She realized something in that moment. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about choice. She could continue. She could pretend. She could push this confrontation into tomorrow and protect the image of today. Or she could accept that the truth had arrived exactly when it needed to. Enrique watched her closely, sensing the shift. Isabela, he said quietly, almost pleading now, please. She didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she reached toward the officiant and gently took the microphone from his hand. The movement was slow, deliberate, and undeniable. Conversations died completely. Even the wind seemed to still. Enrique's eyes widened slightly. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Isabela lifted the microphone, not with trembling hands, but with steady ones. And in that moment, the wedding stopped being about vows. It became about truth. Isabela didn't rush. That was the first thing everyone noticed. She didn't grab the microphone like someone about to make a scene. She took it the way someone accepts responsibility. Enrique reached toward her instinctively. "Don't," he whispered urgently. "Please, not like this." She looked at him, and for the first time, there was no search in her eyes, no request for reassurance, no hope that he would fix it. There was only clarity. "Like what?" she asked quietly. He had no answer that didn't sound selfish. She turned toward the guests. For a brief second, she saw their faces the way they must see her. White dress, veil slightly lifted by the wind, ring still on her finger, the ceremony suspended in midair. She could feel the weight of their expectations. The embarrassment, the discomfort, the curiosity, but none of it was heavier than the truth standing beside her. She brought the microphone closer. "I need a moment," she said. Her voice carried evenly across the garden. "No cracks, no drama, just control. I didn't expect this. None of us did." A faint, nervous laugh moved through the crowd, then died immediately. "I asked him one question," she continued, "and he answered it." Enrique's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going. "He lied," she said simply. The word hung in the air. Direct, clean, unavoidable. For 6 months. No exaggeration. No insult. Just fact. Enrique stepped closer again, lowering his voice. "We can talk about this privately," he insisted. She lifted her free hand slightly without looking at him. "No." That single word shifted the balance of the entire moment. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't emotional. It was final. He stopped speaking. The guests stopped breathing. Isabela looked at Camila then, not as a rival, but as a witness. "Thank you," she said softly. The sincerity in her tone surprised even herself. "For not staying silent." Camila nodded once. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just acknowledged it. That acknowledgement felt heavier than applause. Isabela turned back to Enrique. "You told me loyalty mattered more than anything," she said. "You said honesty was non-negotiable." He opened his mouth again. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You negotiated it." The precision of that sentence left no space for defense. A few people in the crowd lowered their phones slowly, as if realizing they were no longer watching entertainment, but witnessing something irreversible. Isabela felt the ring again. She studied it for a second, as if trying to remember how it felt when it first slid onto her finger. It had felt like certainty. Now it felt like weight. "Today isn't the day my wedding ends," she said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear. "It's the day my illusion ends." A subtle ripple moved through the guests. The words weren't loud, but they landed deeply. Enrique shook his head slightly. "You're overreacting," he muttered. She looked at him almost gently. "No," she said. "I'm reacting exactly once." That line cut deeper than anger ever could. She slipped the ring off her finger slowly. There was no dramatic gesture, no throwing it, no spectacle, just a simple removal. The small circle of gold left a pale mark on her skin where it had rested minutes before. She held it in her palm for a second, then stepped toward him and placed it in his hand. His fingers closed around it automatically, as if he didn't know what else to do. "Love isn't competition," she said quietly, not into the microphone now, but directly to him. "It's truth. And if truth has to fight for space, it's already lost." He stared at her, stunned. For the first time since this began, he looked smaller, not because he had been accused, but because he had been understood. There was no chaos, no shouting, no insults, just consequence. She turned back toward the guests one last time. "I'm sorry you came to celebrate something that won't happen," she said. but I'd rather disappoint you today than disappoint myself for the rest of my life. The honesty in that sentence shifted something in the air. People weren't looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at her with respect. Enrique stepped forward again, desperation creeping into his voice. Isabela, don't walk away from everything. She looked at him calmly. You already did. There was nothing left to argue after that. Camila stepped back slightly, giving space without being asked. She had done what she came to do. The rest belonged to Isabela. Isabela handed the microphone back to the officiant, who took it silently. Then she gathered the front of her dress, not dramatically, just practically, and stepped down from the altar. Each step felt lighter than the last. She didn't rush. She didn't look back immediately. Behind her, Enrique remained standing where she had left him, the ring still in his hand, the ceremony unfinished, the illusion fully exposed. And for the first time since the music had started that afternoon, there was no confusion about what was happening. The wedding had stopped, but something else had begun. No one knew when to move first. For several long seconds after Isabela stepped down from the altar, the entire garden remained suspended in disbelief. Enrique stood exactly where she had left him, the ring pressing into his palm so tightly that the edges marked his skin. The officiant looked at the unfinished script in his hands, then slowly closed it. A chair scraped softly somewhere in the second row. That sound broke the spell. Conversations didn't explode. They resumed cautiously, like people unsure whether they were allowed to speak. Isabela didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked past the rows of guests at a steady pace, aware of their eyes, but not crushed by them. Her father met her halfway down the aisle. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder, and that quiet gesture told her she wasn't alone in what she had just done. Enrique finally moved. Isabela, he called out, but his voice lacked authority now. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even persuasion. It was uncertainty. She paused, but didn't turn immediately. That pause forced him to feel the distance fully. When she did look back, there was no hatred in her expression, just finality. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, loud enough for others to hear. The sentence sounded fragile, almost rehearsed from a different version of this day, where he imagined himself misunderstood instead of exposed. You don't want to get caught, she replied calmly. The difference settled over the guests like truth usually does, quiet, heavy, undeniable. Camila had remained near the altar, giving space without disappearing. She wasn't triumphant. She wasn't relieved. She looked like someone who had lost something too, even if she had just saved someone else from losing more. Enrique turned toward her suddenly, frustration rising now that the outcome was clear. You didn't have to do this, he said. Camila met his gaze steadily. I did. There was no argument left inside that word. He looked between them, as if searching for sympathy from either side. He found none. Not cruelty, not rage, just consequence. A few guests began to leave quietly, unsure whether to offer condolences or congratulations. Some hugged Isabela briefly. Some avoided eye contact entirely. The decorations still stood exactly as they had before. The flowers, the arch, the carefully arranged chairs. Proof that appearances can remain intact even when meaning collapses. Enrique finally looked down at the ring in his hand. It seemed smaller now, less significant. He had imagined placing it on her finger would secure something permanent. Instead, it had exposed something fragile. We could have worked through this, he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Camila shook her head slightly. You don't work through deception by hiding it, she said. He didn't respond. For the first time that afternoon, he had nothing left to defend himself with. Isabela stood a few steps away now, her father beside her, her mother approaching slowly. She felt the strange contrast inside her, loss and relief existing in the same space. She had lost a wedding. She had lost a version of the future she had carefully imagined. But she had not lost herself, and that realization steadied her more than comfort could. Enrique took a hesitant step forward again, but stopped when he saw the boundary in her posture. He understood it now, not because she shouted, not because she humiliated him, but because she chose herself without apology. Camila adjusted the strap of her bag and prepared to leave. Before she turned away completely, her eyes met Isabela's one last time. There was no need for words. Gratitude had already been spoken. Pain had already been acknowledged. They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't promise friendship. They shared something simpler, recognition of the truth. Camila walked back down the same aisle she had entered, her steps just as steady as before. This time no one questioned why she was there. Enrique remained at the altar alone, surrounded by decorations meant for celebration. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. He hadn't lost two women because they conspired against him. He had lost them because he tried to divide honesty into portions. Isabela looked at him once more, not with longing, not with bitterness, just with clarity. Fidelity isn't about love, she said quietly, not into a microphone now, not performing for anyone. It's about character. The sentence was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had unfolded. Enrique didn't argue. He couldn't. The truth had already spoken louder than he ever could. The guests continued dispersing slowly, the ceremony dissolving into fragments of conversation. Some would remember the scandal. Some would remember the silence. But what would stay longer was the way she stood there and refused to pretend. Isabela felt the absence of the ring on her finger, the cool air against the skin where it had rested minutes ago. It no longer felt like loss. It felt like release. She turned fully now and walked away from the altar without hesitation. Each step carried her further from a promise built on secrecy and closer to something uncertain but honest. Behind her, Enrique remained still, surrounded by what could have been. He had built two truths and lost both when they collided. There was no shouting, no dramatic collapse, just consequence unfolding quietly. Sometimes the most painful moment in your life is the one that saves you from years of quiet betrayal. Sometimes an interruption is not humiliation, but protection. And sometimes the person who walks away from the altar is not the one who loses. Isabela did not lose a husband that day. She lost an illusion. And in doing so, she kept something far more valuable than a ceremony. She kept her dignity.